In the darkest corners of space, where starlight barely penetrates and hope often dies, there exists a tale that makes even the most hardened warriors tremble. I am HFY Varloren, and I bear the burden of being the sole survivor of what we now call Hell's Half Acre. But this isn't just my story. It's a warning, one that every species in the galaxy needs to hear. The year was 2457 by human reckoning. Our mighty Zar'kax expeditionary force had been engaging humans for 3 standard cycles, and our arrogance had reached its peak. We thought we had them figured out. Their slower ships, their primitive weapons, their seemingly simple tactics. We documented everything about them in our vast databases, ran countless simulations, and believed we understood their weaknesses. Gods, how wrong we were. You see, there was something about humans that our most advanced quantum computers couldn't calculate. Something our best military minds failed to grasp. They called it determination, but that simple word is like calling a supernova a mere light show. I first saw one of their combat medics during the Battle of Proxima Ridge. Through my scope, I watched this small figure in white-marked armor dance through plasma fire like it was nothing more than rain. They moved with a purpose that seemed almost divine, reaching wounded soldiers that by all logic should have been abandoned. At the time, I merely noted it as another human oddity, their strange obsession with preserving life, even in death's domain. They had an ancient saying, one that would later haunt my dreams. First, do no harm. Simple words, yet they carried the weight of centuries. But there was another part, one that no alien race took seriously until it was too late. Harm those who harm the healers, and your existence shall be forfeit. Our intelligence corps prided themselves on their thorough documentation of these combat medics. We knew about the Red Cross symbol, could identify their advanced medical kits, and had countless reports of them treating both friend and foe. But what we failed to understand, what we catastrophically misinterpreted, was what these individuals meant to human military psychology. They weren't just medical personnel, they were something more, something almost mythological, living embodiments of humanity's most terrifying contradiction, infinite mercy, wrapped in the potential for unlimited vengeance. And I was about to learn exactly what that meant. But before I tell you about the night that changed everything, the night that turned the Goro Valley into a monument of human retribution, I need you to do something important. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you'll want to be here for what comes next. This story, this warning, it might just save your species one day. The red glow of our ship's emergency lighting cast ominous shadows across the briefing room as I stood before my 1,000-strong battalion. The holographic display showed our target, a human forward operations and observation post, perched like an eagle's nest on the Goro Valley ridgeline. Intelligence suggested it was lightly defended. No more than 50 humans. The fools had positioned themselves on high ground, yes, but they'd left themselves completely surrounded. Victory through superior firepower, I announced to my troops, reciting our military doctrine. The words tasted like ash in my mouth now, but back then they felt like gospel. We'll soften them up with artillery, then move in for the kill. I remember the excitement rippling through the ranks. For many, this would be their first real engagement with humans. They'd heard the stories, of course, whispered tales of human tenacity, but surely those were exaggerated. After all, we had them outnumbered 20-1. As our artillery batteries opened fire, painting the night sky with streaks of plasma, I noticed something odd. The humans weren't returning fire at full capacity. They were conserving ammunition, taking only calculated shots. At the time, I interpreted this as weakness. Another mistake. The battle dragged into the night cycle. That's when our communications officer picked up a transmission on an open channel. The humans were requesting a ceasefire, not to surrender, but to evacuate their wounded. I remember laughing, actually laughing. "Let them come," I ordered, my mandibles clicking with anticipation. "When their medical transports arrive, we'll turn them to ash, show them the price of their arrogance." The first transport appeared like a ghost through the clouds, its red cross gleaming under the 3 moons of Goromato. Our gunners were ready. The first volley caught it square in the engines, sending it spiraling into the valley below. The second transport managed to deploy its countermeasures but still died in a spectacular fireball. The third almost made it. But it was the 4th transport that changed everything. Somehow, it slipped through our barrage. I watched through my scope as its side doors opened, expecting to see troops pouring out. Instead, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A human in white-marked armor, carefully lowering a stretcher. I had a clear shot. The targeting computer was screaming for me to take it, but something stopped me. Perhaps the same instinct that keeps prey animals from wandering into obvious traps. I watched, transfixed, as they evacuated their wounded with mechanical precision. Then came those 2 words. Words that would be carved into the nightmares of every surviving alien race for generations to come. Broken arrow. The response was instantaneous. The very sky seemed to tear open as human warships dropped out of hyperspace, their massive forms blotting out the stars. The valley erupted in a symphony of destruction as every human asset within 50 light-years responded to the call. You see, what we didn't understand then was that Broken Arrow wasn't just a distress signal, it was humanity announcing that they were removing all restrictions. All rules of engagement were about to be suspended. We had violated something sacred to them, and now they would show us exactly what that meant. If you haven't already, smash that like button and hit subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to be notified when our next video drops. Now, where was I? Ah yes, Broken Arrow. The words had barely finished echoing through our comm systems when the sky turned to fire. The humans have a saying about bringing a knife to a gunfight. Well, we had brought artillery to what became a apocalypse. The first wave was their atmospheric fighters, swarms of them, moving in patterns that seemed to defy physics. They called them Valkyries, after their ancient goddesses of war. Fitting, as these steel angels didn't come to guide the dead to paradise, they came to create them. 17 minutes, that's all it took. Let me break down those minutes for you, because each one taught me something new about human warfare. In the first 3 minutes, our anti-aircraft defenses were systematically eliminated, not destroyed, eliminated. The precision was surgical, almost beautiful in its efficiency. Our gunners didn't even have time to report their deaths. Minutes 4 through 6 introduced us to something called danger close operations. You see, most species maintain safe distances between their forces and orbital strikes. Humans? They've trained their troops to fight literally under the shadow of their own bombardment. We learned this when their ground forces started advancing under the cover of orbital strikes that should have killed everything in their path. By minute 7, I witnessed something that still haunts my dreams. A human combat medic, their white armor now stained with mud and blood, sprinting through our lines. They weren't firing their weapon, they were heading for one of our wounded. I watched through my scope as they began treating a soldier who had been trying to kill them moments before. That's when I understood. Their medics weren't just healers who could fight, they were the physical embodiment of humanity's most terrifying characteristic, the ability to show mercy and unleash hell in the same breath. Minutes 8 through 12 introduced us to their orbital bombardment capabilities. They had ships in orbit that could have simply glassed the entire valley. Instead, they chose their targets with devastating precision. They weren't just killing us, they were sending a message. The final 5 minutes, deep shuddering breath. The final 5 minutes showed us why humans call their elite medical units combat medics. Those who had survived the initial onslaught witnessed something unprecedented. The medics we had targeted, the ones who had survived our attack on their transports, began coordinating the counterattack. They weren't just treating casualties, they were calling in strikes, directing troops, and turning our carefully planned ambush into our own funeral pyre. When the dust settled, where 1,000 warriors had stood, only craters remained. The valley had been transformed into a monument to human retribution, and I alone survived, spared by that single moment of hesitation when I chose not to fire on their medic. Now, let me tell you about my interrogation and why it still wakes me in cold sweats 3 decades later. They didn't take me to a prison ship or a military facility. Instead, I found myself in what they called a field hospital, a massive structure that had materialized in the valley seemingly overnight, the same valley where my battalion had been vaporized mere hours before. The first thing that struck me was the silence. Not complete silence, there was the steady beeping of medical equipment, the soft whoosh of ventilation systems, and the quiet murmur of human voices. But none of the harsh interrogation I had expected. I was placed in a clean bed, my wounds treated with the same care they showed their own. My primary caregiver was a combat medic, the very one I had chosen not to shoot. She had removed her battle-stained armor, but I recognized her movements. Dr. Sarah Chen, as I would later learn, had been treating wounded soldiers for 17 years, the same number of minutes it took to turn my battalion into memory. Why, I finally asked her on the 3rd day, why treat me with such care after what we did? Her response chilled me more than any threat could have. Because this is who we are, and this is why you failed. She proceeded to explain something that our intelligence had completely missed. Human combat medics undergo what they call the dual path training. The first path teaches them to heal anything, anywhere, under any circumstances. The second path teaches them exactly how to take a life apart, piece by piece, system by system. They learn to heal so thoroughly that they understand precisely how to do the opposite when necessary. Your battalion, she said while changing my bandages, didn't just attack medical personnel. You attacked the very principle that makes us human, the choice to heal rather than harm. When you violated that principle, you forced us to show you the other side of our nature. Then she showed me something on her datapad, footage from our attack on their medical transports. But this wasn't the external view I remembered. This was from inside the ships. I saw medics trying to stabilize critically wounded patients while their ships were hit. I watched them use their own bodies to shield the wounded as their transports crashed. And most horrifyingly, I saw them continue treating patients even as their ships burned around them. We call it the Hippocratic Oath, she continued. First, do no harm. But there's an unspoken part to that oath that every species learns eventually. Those who harm healers forfeit their right to mercy. The footage continued, showing other incidents across human space where various species had targeted their medical personnel. The results were always the same: total annihilation of the attacking forces, not out of vengeance they claimed, but as a preventive measure, a lesson written in fire and death. The three questions that changed everything weren't asked during formal interrogation. They came during quiet moments in that field hospital, between treatments and medications, in the still hours when truth finds its way through the cracks of our carefully constructed defenses. The first question came from me. Why do your enemies call you Doc instead of using your rank or species designation? Dr. Chen was checking my vitals when I asked. She paused, her hands hovering over her medical scanner. Because Doc isn't just a title, it's a promise, she said. When you call someone Doc, you're acknowledging a pact that predates our journey to the stars. It means I trust you with my life, and more importantly, I know you'll save my life regardless of who I am. Ah. The second question arose after I witnessed something extraordinary. A wounded soldier from my own species was brought in, a survivor from a different battle. I watched as Dr. Chen treated him with the same care she'd shown me, despite the fact that he spat curses at her in our native tongue. Can we help those who hate you? I asked. Her response was immediate. Hate is often a symptom of a deeper wound. We treat those too. But it was the third question that revealed the true nature of human combat medics. I asked her about the weapons their medical ships carried, why vessels of healing were armed with planet-killer capabilities. She set down her instruments and looked at me with eyes that had seen too much death. Those weapons aren't for killing, she said. They're a reminder. Every medical ship carries enough firepower to sterilize a solar system, because sometimes the only way to preserve life is to make its enemies understand the cost of threatening it. She showed me classified footage from what humans called the Perseus incident. A human medical ship responding to a distress call found itself ambushed by pirates. Instead of fleeing or surrendering, the ship's AI activated its defense protocols. The resulting battle lasted less than 3 minutes. The pirate fleet, over 30 ships strong, was reduced to atomic particles. The weapons are a vaccine, she explained, using terms she knew I'd understand. A preventive measure against those who might think healers are easy targets. We carry them not because we want to use them, but because their very existence ensures we rarely have to. That's when I finally understood what we'd failed to grasp about human combat medics. They weren't just medical personnel who could fight. They weren't even warriors who could heal. They were the embodiment of humanity's ultimate warning to the galaxy. We prefer peace. We choose to heal. But if you force us to fight, we will end you. In the decades since Hell's Half Acre, I've watched other species learn this lesson, always at great cost. The Crix Collective lost 3 colony worlds after targeting a medical convoy. The Drachnid Empire collapsed after their systematic campaign against human field hospitals. Each time, the response was the same: swift, absolute, and final. We thought we understood human warfare. We thought we could calculate their responses, predict their strategies, but we never understood that their combat medics weren't just a branch of their military. They were a fundamental expression of human nature itself, the capacity to heal and harm, to save and destroy, to show infinite mercy or unleash unlimited retribution. In the end, the most terrifying thing about human combat medics isn't their skill in battle or their advanced medical knowledge, it's their choice. Every day they choose to heal rather than harm, they choose to save rather than destroy, but they never, ever forget how to do the opposite. And that's why, to this day, when I hear someone called Doc, I remember the night we learned the true meaning of those 3 letters, written in fire, across the stars. If this glimpse into the galaxy's most terrifying healers kept you on the edge of your seat, slam that like button into another dimension. Want more classified stories from the depths of space? Join our growing community of survivors. Hit subscribe and become part of the archive. Share your own encounters with human combat medics in the comments below. After all, knowledge is survival in this vast, dark universe. This is HFY Valoran, last survivor of Hell's Half Acre, reminding you, the Red Cross isn't just a symbol, it's a warning.